And all you Bearcat fans out there, we're going to take it out to Cincinnati, Ohio, where the former American Athletic Conference Bearcats are now moving to the Big 12, playing big boy football. And to talk about it and talk about the 2023 season, Mason, what do you think about the coaching changes and the conference changes that are going on for the Bearcats?
Yeah, I mean, you said it. The Bearcats had their hands full this season moving into the Big 12. Luke Fickell moves on to Wisconsin after 6 seasons with the Bearcats, finishing with a 57-18 record, making a Peach Bowl appearance, and also making the college football playoff once, which was outstanding for a program of Cincinnati's caliber. Now, Luke Fickell moves out. He's headed on to Wisconsin. In steps Scott Satterfield. Formerly, he was with Louisville, where he went 25-24 over 4 seasons. He's known as an offensive coach, but certainly you have to think, I would think at least as a Bearcat fan, you're probably thinking, man, I wish we could have held on to Luke Fickell, right? That's what I would be thinking if I were a Bearcat fan. Um, but Scott Satterfield steps in. He's an offensive guy. Um, it's going to be really interesting to see how this all plays out for the Bearcats. And like you mentioned, moving into the Big 12. So the Bearcats last season did finish 9-4 and ranked 30th in Bill Connolly's SP Plus. But now again, they're stepping into the Big 12, and this is going to be a huge step up from the AAC.
There's no doubt about that. It's a big step up, and typically when we see these teams step into new conferences, for the majority of the time, there is a learning curve, and I think Scott Satterfield is definitely going to have his work cut out for him. When it really just seemed like he was getting it going at Louisville. So let's talk a little bit more about this team and dissect who's coming and who's going.
Yeah, so some of the notable departures. One core that I'm looking at is the wide receiver core. It's glaring, right? They lost 7 to the transfer portal, and 2 were drafted. So 9 total wide receivers alone are now no longer with the program. He had 3 total drafted, including the 2 wide receivers mentioned, Trey Tucker and Tyler Scott, and also had a tight end, Josh Weil. So this is going to be, I mean, off the bat, if you're looking at just who left the program, the 9 wide receivers and a tight end that was drafted, there's a lot. What are your pass catching options at this point, right? He also lost 11 players on the defensive side of the ball and only brought in 4. So this is a clean slate for Scott Satterfield, which isn't such a bad thing, except you've got to play a whole football season, right, with a clean slate. So that's going to be a real challenge. Now, on the positive, so they lost 23 guys in the transfer portal alone. That's a lot of attrition. But on the positive, they did bring back 17. Okay, so 17 additionals coming from the transfer portal. The biggest one of those being quarterback Emory Jones. He's a familiar name. Any true college football fan knows Emory Jones. This was a guy coming out of the state of Georgia in high school who was a 5-star recruit at one point. Was actually, believe it or not, Dan Mullen's first quarterback recruit when he got to Florida. That's kind of hard to believe because that seems like so long ago. But he's heading into his 6th season here in college football, and he decided to take his talent to Cincinnati, and he's going to give this one more shot. His totals last season were not spectacular. He was with Arizona State. That's where he transferred to after Florida, and he ended up totaling 1,500 yards, had 7 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, a 63% completion percentage. So not too bad on the completion percentage. Only attempted 199 passes. I'm not sure if there was an injury there, but these are less than adequate numbers, honestly. Playing for Arizona State over there in the Pac-12, but um, so they get Emory Jones. He's going to have a lot to he's going to have a lot of work to do, right? Coming in, like I said, with a clean slate. And but with that, Scott Satterfield did do one thing extremely well, and his staff. They were able to get 6 wide receivers to transfer into the program. So they lose 7, right? Just in the transfer portal, they lose 2 wide receivers to the draft, 1 tight end to the draft, and so they bring in 6 wide receivers. One of those is former teammate of Emory Jones from the University of Florida, Xavier Henderson. So you got to think there's some chemistry there. Henderson is actually I went back and studied some of his film. He's actually a pretty good wide receiver. I think he got stuck in a lackluster offense over there at Florida. And I expect him to be pretty productive with the Bearcats, honestly. He should be their main target. I think he's got. I think he should. I think he's going into his 3rd season, so he should have another year of eligibility in what is probably a rebuilding year for Cincinnati. Let's be honest. But also to couple with Xavier Henderson, keep an eye out for D. Wiggins. D. Wiggins came over from he came over from Louisville with Satterfield, so he should be
Hmm.
familiar with the offense. I'm excited to see kind of what he's able to do and what him and Xavier Henderson are able to do as a 1-2 combo.
Yeah, Emory Jones and Xavier Henderson were raw talents coming out, and uh, Emory, it just seemed like it. He had a an issue. It seemed getting flustered in the pocket, wanted to take off. Um, and maybe part of that was to do with his offensive line that he had at Florida that year. But you know what, we're going to see because he's running out of eligibility, and if he's going to do it, uh, it's going to be it's going to be for these Bearcats. So with all those offensive transfers in, which it makes up the majority here, I see. About 14 of them, 13 or 14 of them are on the offense. So tell me a little bit more about that defense. I see that they had several go out and less come in. How are we looking on defense this year?
Yeah, they only brought they lost 11 on the defensive side of the ball and only brought in 4. Um, I'm not sure if that was maybe Satterfield saying, "Hey, we're going to go all in on offense. We're going to strengthen a strength that I feel like I have, and we're going to play to our strengths." Or was he just not able to get a lot of defensive players, Or third option, maybe he just felt pretty comfortable with who he had on the defensive side of the ball, which is a possibility, I suppose. Um, the edge position is definitely getting an upgrade in transfer Grzesiak. I believe that's how you say his name. Um, this is a guy who's going to step in and wreak some havoc, I think, for the Bearcats. And the secondary, they lost 4 cornerbacks to the transfer portal. The Shepard being the most notable one, but also cornerback Hardaway left, and they like who they have coming in. The the word on the streets is that spring training, these guys showed up. They're a talented bunch. They just lack the experience. So again, they're a part of this rebuilding year for Cincinnati. Let's see what they can do. Let's put them out there and see what they can do. See what kind of playmakers they are. Ultimately, I do think the defense ends up taking a step back. But moving over to the offensive side of the ball, the biggest question is really going to be whether or not Emory Jones can play better at quarterback than he has in his career at Florida and at Arizona State. Um, Outside of that, I mean, talent wise, the wide receiver room is about equally talented as it was in 22. They are missing those draft picks, but I like what they brought back. I like what they brought in with the transfer portal. Um, and really, the offense as a whole is well rounded. They've got to figure out the quarterback situation. Can Emory Jones get it going? Because outside of that, I think Satterfield's going to give him the playbook, the tools, and the players and personnel around him to get the job done.
Absolutely. Well, with all that being said, they are stepping into a new conference like we discussed, and with that is a lot of new opponents, and so there's going to be a lot of rivalries that are going to be kindled over the next few years. So what with that 5.5 game over under? Uh, how are you feeling as far as the betting line goes? And are you under or are you over on this group?
Well, I have that number right at 5.5. So a quick run through the schedule here. Eastern Kentucky, I have that as a win. Pittsburgh push. Miami of Ohio win. Oklahoma loss. BYU loss. Iowa State push. Baylor push. Oklahoma State push. UCF push. That's probably more of a loss than a push, but I'll give them that. Houston push. West Virginia push. And Kansas loss for me. This schedule is pretty mediocre. I think Cincinnati was dealt a pretty fair hand stepping into the Big 12. Could have been a lot worse.
No Texas.
No Texas, absolutely, absolutely. I don't see Texas. I don't see Texas Tech.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see Kansas State. So I think that they got a pretty fair draw. So 5.5, that could be a much lower number. That being said, I feel like it's such a good line. You really could go either way on this. Um, with there being so many push games of I just broke the schedule down. There were only two games that I think are guaranteed wins, and those are their two of their out of conference games: Eastern Kentucky and Miami of Ohio. Pitt's another one that they could win. I think Pitt's going to be pretty down this season. Um, so even with that, let's say they win against Pitt, right? You're still looking at six push games that could go either way. And I don't feel confident about UCF. I give that about a 0.25. It's not even a true half. So, with that being said, and so much volatility, I've got to go under on the line. If you're asking me to take a pick, one side or the other, I'm going to have to go under here for the Bearcats for the 2023 season.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you. I don't have a ton of confidence in this situation right now. Got a new coach, which in turn means a lot of new things going on top of going into a new conference. As we go through these Big 12 teams and the old American teams and BYU, um, it's going to be a little harsh. The water's going to feel pretty cold, I think, and maybe take a little getting used to. And I think Cincinnati's, even with all the success they've had, the playoff, going to the playoff, nobody can ever take that away from them. But uh,
Right.
it's going to be a season to hold on to because I don't think this season is going to be one that Bearcat fans are super happy with. I'm picking them at 5 wins, and I think they're
Okay.
going under. Just for the record, so we can go back and visit this, and everybody can laugh at me and tell me how wrong I am whenever they win 7. You know, uh, but
That'd be a hell of a start.
it would be a hell of a start for Satterfield, and it felt like he was just getting it going at Louisville with the recruiting and the NIL program they had going there. So maybe he can get it rolling in Cincinnati or keep it rolling, should I say? We will see. It's going to be an interesting 2023.
Again, Bearcat fans, realize this is a rebuilding year. Okay, I know you know this, but don't get frustrated with
And
the
and not
rebuild
a
year.
not a Nick Saban rebuilding year.
No, this isn't a Nick Saban rebuilding year. This isn't
Yeah.
even a Kirby Smart rebuilding year, which was 7-5. So, gosh, just have some patience. Every team goes through this at some point, and they'll I think that they'll eventually rise to the top and be fine. Probably starting in 2024.